evening, everybody. Welcome. I want to welcome everybody to Hibbing Public Utilities led Town Hall meeting. Actually got a really good turnout. I was worried there for a little bit that we were going to have 5 or 6 people, but everybody filled in nicely. So thank you for showing up and making sure that we could hear you today. I'll thank you in advance for being here and for your attendance and your questions. For those of you that don't know, my name is James Bayless. I'm the current sitting chairperson of Hibbing Public Utilities Commission, as well as a council person representing Ward 1 on the Hibbing City Council. So if you want anybody that you could yell at from both angles, I'm your guy. The goal for the evening is just to give everybody here an opportunity. So we want to get as much information out to the public as we can about the lead service line issues that we're dealing with in Hibbing. We want to give you information about what we're currently doing and have done over the course of 2025, and then what our plans are for the future, and hopefully we can accomplish all of those goals. So we have people in the house with us tonight that are going to have expertise that I don't have, and we're going to offer them as resources. Some of them were out in the hallway prior to you coming in from Minnesota Department of Health and St. Louis County, as well as people from HPU giving information over there. So please stop and talk to them as you see them and grab whatever information we have out there. So I'm not going to talk too much. I do want to make sure that everybody understands today the real goal is the question and answer portion of this. I want everybody here to know that we want your questions. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what we can do to best serve you as a city and as a utility. So this is not just for us to sit up here and listen to ourselves talk. We're going to have some presentations with some really good information. But after those are done, we do have a question and answer portion, and that is the key to this for us. We want everybody to feel welcome to ask all of their questions. So, and if we don't have answers, we'll get you those answers and we'll get your contact information and get them back to you. So please be interactive during the question and answer. I do want to say thank you first off before we get started. We do have some other commission members, Commissioner Sandsted, Commissioner Stokes. We have Mayor Pete Heidwick here. We have Representative Farnsworth, right? Senator, I'm sorry, Senator Farnsworth is here somewhere. But yeah, we have some good people in the room, so if you see these people and you know who they are, stop and talk to us. Let us know what your concerns are. Again, this is just about the lead service line issues we're dealing with. Other town halls can be had for other issues, but this is our focus for this meeting. So we have a ton of good resources, and don't be shy, okay? I'm going to hand the meeting off to Elliot Dixon. He is a really valuable part of our team at Hibbing Public Utilities. He's going to MC the meeting for the evening, so he's going to take over, and I'm going to go sit and watch with the rest of you and hopefully fix up some questions. So, Elliot?
Ron, did you want to get the lights?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much to Commission Chair and City Councilor James Bayless. It's a very, very wonderful introduction to the meeting tonight, and we're very appreciative to have the turnout that we do, and that's because we get to hear directly from the customers, ratepayers, residents, whatever you want to call yourself, but what I know as our friends, our neighbors, and our family right here in Hibbing. So as Hibbing Public Utilities, we are a utility owned and operated by the people of Hibbing for the people of Hibbing. We serve the best interests of the people of Hibbing, and we can only do that with your direct input, with your direct feedback. And you being here tonight is incredibly important. So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to give a quick overview of our meeting and then make sure that we can keep moving along and hear from our presenters tonight as well. So we've got 3 main presenters tonight. The first is St. Louis Health Office. We'll be talking about the health impacts and dangers around lead contamination. The Minnesota Department of Health also has sent several representatives. They'll be talking about the annual lead testing process that's resulted in these lead action exceedance levels, as well as provide a statewide assessment, kind of putting into perspective why lead has become such an important priority and removing lead has become such an important priority for our statewide public health. And then finally, they'll be talking about reducing personal risk of exposure as well, which is a very important information that we hope you're able to take a lot away from. Finally, HPU is going to be presenting tonight about our Get the Lead Out projects, what we're doing to identify and remove lead sources from across the city of Hibbing. And finally, we'll be talking about our need of additional support from our community members, advocating for our community, for the needs of our community, so that our voices can be heard, not just in this theater tonight, but down in St. Paul, as Senator Farnsworth, as Mayor Hyduk, and many other representatives and local leaders take our story and take our needs down to St. Paul to secure funding and support for these projects as well. So I want to make sure that we have a clear basis of success for tonight's meeting. And so I've been working with our staff and with the Department of Health and with the county to identify some meeting goals. And there are things that I want to make sure that each and every one of you in this room tonight are able to understand before you leave this meeting. And if not understand, at least just make sure that we can set up a meeting in order to continue these conversations, because this presentation and certainly this problem does not end here tonight. So this is going to be an ongoing project and an ongoing conversation as we continue to pursue these projects for our community. So number one, we want to be able to inform our residents about the lead testing results. So the annual testing results that we do every single year, we want to talk about what and why this is done. We want to make sure that each and every one of you understand that process. We want to provide education to reduce personal exposure to lead and make sure that everyone feels comfortable with taking the steps necessary in order to reduce the personal risk of exposure. Number three, we want to present HPU's system-wide response so that our community members have a clear understanding of what HPU is doing to identify and remove this hazard from our water system. And then finally, we want to prepare residents to support HPU's projects and funding asks. So that's already something I've kind of covered and won't need to repeat myself on. You are a very important piece of this project, and your ability to make your voices heard is essential in bringing success to HPU and to the city of Hibbing. So with those set, I'll pass off the clicker here and then the PowerPoint to our first presenter, Ashton Martin, who is a public health nurse with the St. Louis County Health Office. So Ashton, if you want. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ashton Martin. I'm a public health nurse with St. Louis County's early childhood programs, mostly working with families who are impacted with lead toxicity in the area. I was invited to talk with you all today about the health risks of lead and the importance of prevention. My goal is that I give you a little bit about the dangers of lead toxicity and why these initiatives and goals of the subsequent speakers is really important. So I'll just do a general overview of what lead is. Lead is a naturally occurring element that's found in the Earth's crust. And back in the 50s, they found that, hey, it's a really durable material. We're going to add it to plumbing. We're going to add it to paint. We're going to add it to bullets. We're going to add it to industrial facilities pick it up. We're going to add it to gasoline. But the thing with lead is that even though we don't use it in all of these products anymore, it doesn't just naturally go away. It's really difficult to get rid of. So how does it enter the body? It can be inhaled in industrial settings like welding facilities. It can be digested through contaminated foods because it can be found in soil. It can be found in water just from runoff. It can be found in water from pipes. It can be found from touching contaminated surfaces and then eating. It's then distributed throughout the body and absorbed via the GI tract into the bones and teeth, mostly. And then it can even be deposited into soft tissues like the kidney, spleen, liver, and brain. And where I find that it's important for you to know this is because there are some diet-related things that you can do to reduce your risk. Those with iron deficiency anemia or calcium deficiencies are just most at risk because lead behaves like other minerals in the body. So if you're deficient in one of those, your body's going to take the lead and absorb it in place of the iron or calcium that you want. So who's most vulnerable? Children are most vulnerable, right? And you've got to think about the behaviors of children. First of all, they have developing brains, right? So because their nervous systems are still developing, they're 5 times more likely to increase or to absorb lead than us adults are. Pregnant women and breastfeeding women, because they can pass any lead in their system off to babies with developing nervous systems. Low-income families, because they oftentimes live in homes that still have lead in them and they have no way to pay to take care of the baby. And children living in homes built before 1978. You think those old pipes, you think that old lead paint. And what I want you to know too here is to think about if you're a parent or grandparent, the things that you can do to help reduce their risk. So making sure that if you're living in an old home, doing a lead questionnaire to help make sure that you're identifying areas that are potential lead contaminated areas. So lead's effects are not only just on children under 6, they can affect anybody at any age. Adolescents, we see that lead exposure can reduce their risk of poor judgment, ADHD type behaviors, problematic school performance, and in adults it can increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. So it has very systemic and serious health effects for anybody of any age. So, is there a safe or acceptable amount of lead exposure? And the answer to that would be no. The effects from lead are irreversible. So the best way to treat it is to prevent the toxicity itself. So if you know that there could be lead somewhere, get rid of it. So again, my final tips and takeaway from my short presentation here on just the health effects of lead is that it can be found in many areas of the home, including peeling and chipped paint and old water pipes. So making sure that you fill out an assessment or a health risk survey of where lead might be in your house, and we have that on the MPH website as well as St. Louis County's website. I want you to know that lead's effects on the body are systemic. Throughout the entire body, you can have effects on your health, and it's irreversible. And the best way to treat lead toxicity is to prevent it from happening in the first place. So again, getting that lead out. And then I just put my number on here because you can always call St. Louis County with any questions you have about lead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashton. And up next, we've got from the Minnesota Department of Health, Hannah Mendez, who will be presenting on the lead testing process as well as a statewide assessment of that, and then covering personal risk reduction as well. Hannah, thank you.
Taking the time out of your day to come and listen to us today. So my name is Hannah Mendez. I am a compliance engineer with the Drinking Water Protection section of the Minnesota Department of Health. So to give you a little bit of a background on what Drinking Water Protection does, we work with utilities throughout the state to ensure that everyone, everywhere in Minnesota has access to safe drinking water. So we have many different rules throughout our section that involve all aspects of protecting drinking water, including source water protection, regulation of wells, and training our water operators throughout the state. My role specifically involves implementing the Safe Drinking Water Act in Minnesota, so it's a federal regulation that each state adopts. And I make sure that our water systems sample for contaminants such as lead and copper, and take any risk mitigation steps needed. MDH does offer utilities throughout the state a variety of funding and expertise, which then assists them and their communities in having access to safe drinking water. So today, HPU invited us to come and speak about the lead exceedance here, what that means for you, and how you can prevent or reduce your risk of lead exposure. So to start with how lead enters drinking water, typically the water leaving the treatment plant does not contain lead. Instead, it enters the drinking water through pipe material. So as it flows from the treatment plant to your tap, the water can interact with the metal pipe surface, and it absorbs material from that pipe through a process called corrosion. There are certain characteristics in the water that affects how corrosive it is towards metal, but ultimately lead has to be present for it to get into the drinking water. So because of that, we typically see sources of lead as service lines, either lead or galvanized, or from interior plumbing. So this can be through copper that has lead solder joints, or faucets that have lead components in them. So an action level exceedance means that the system has detected lead in some of their samples, and that they have to take action to reduce and eliminate lead from the drinking water. I do want to emphasize this does not mean that every tap in the drinking water system has elevated levels of lead. As I mentioned, lead has to be present for it to get into the drinking water, and it was banned in the 1980s for use in drinking water systems. So if you live in a newer home, your chances of lead exposure are reduced compared to if you live in an older home. So all water utilities, including Hibbing, are required to sample for lead and copper regularly. In 2025, Hibbing collected 29 samples for their routine monitoring, and 6 of those came back as having high lead levels. So these samples were taken from sites that have the highest likelihood of having lead. All samples, or all locations that samples were collected from either had a lead service line, or they had lead interior plumbing, or those lead solder joints that I mentioned. So really, one of the first steps that you could take as a resident in seeing what your risk of lead exposure is by looking at what your service line material is. We do at MDH, we partnered with the University of Minnesota to develop a statewide map of service lines. We call it the LIT tool. So we do have that available at our table out front, but you can also access it by scanning this QR code, and you can look at your specific address and see what your service line material is. So with the sampling that was done, lead and copper compliance with the federal regulation is based on something called the 90th percentile. So if you have kids, you may be familiar with what a percentile is. For example, if you take your kid to the doctor, they say they're in the 70th percentile of height. That just means they're taller than 70% of kids their age. The lead 90th percentile works the exact same way. So that value is higher than 90% of the samples collected during the monitoring period. So when Hibbing collected their samples in 2025, the 90th percentile came back as 32. We then compare that to the EPA's action level of 15 parts per billion to determine if there's an exceedance. 32 is greater than 15, so they did have an exceedance. But I do want to emphasize also that just because there was an action level exceedance doesn't mean that every sample collected had a detectable lead results. As you can see from the range here, there was quite a range. So a few of the samples didn't have any lead, a few of them had a higher lead result than that 90th percentile. So the point of emphasizing that here is that the amount of lead in the water is very specific to the site. But because there was an action level exceedance, Hibbing Public Utilities is required to take steps to reduce the amount of lead in their system. So I believe a representative from HPU will talk about the specific steps that they are taking, but they have already started investigating the issue, and they've identified steps that they can take to reduce the corrosion of water towards the metal pipes. They will also be performing additional testing over the next year. This will include lead sampling, as well as sampling for different water quality parameters that impact corrosion. And then they will also continue the work that they've already built on with looking for lead service lines and updating their inventory. So I'm sure a lot of you want to know what you can do as a resident to reduce your risk of exposure. So a good first step is to help Hibbing find those lead service lines. Like I mentioned, the MDH and the U of M has a lit tool that you can look up your specific address to see what your service line is. If it comes back as unknown, you can reach out to your utility and figure out how to help them identify that service line. And that'll really help them find where the lead is, and then they can target that to remove it. But there are some things you can do on your day-to-day that'll help reduce the risk of exposure. So the first couple of items you can do is use cold water and let your water run while you're either using water for cooking or if you're drinking it. If you do let your water run, we recommend waiting until there's a noticeable temperature difference, and that's just to make sure that you're getting fresh water coming in and not water that's been sitting in your pipes. You can also clean your aerator regularly. So if you look at the third picture from the left here, that screen that the person's holding is the aerator that's attached to the faucet. You can remove that and soak it in like a vinegar solution and then rinse it just to remove any lead particles that might have gotten caught in that screen. You can also learn about any construction going on in your neighborhood. So sometimes construction can disturb the pipe that's in the ground there and knock free some lead particles. So if you know that there is some big construction projects going on in your area, you can take some of these other steps before you use your water just to know that you're reducing your risk there. Ultimately, the biggest thing you can do is test your water to see what your personal risk level is. Like I mentioned, lead is very site-specific, so to really know what your risk level is, you want to get your water tested, and then you can treat your water as needed based on what that result comes back as. And then finally, if you purchase and use a certified lead filter, that is a great interim solution for you to have access to safe drinking water while the system works through the issue. If you do buy a filter, make sure that it is certified to remove lead. So you'll want to look for some of these certifications here on the screen, and specifically make sure that it is NSF, ANSI 53 or 42 standards, so that either reduces lead or removes particulate. If you scan this QR code on the screen, that'll lead you to EPA's guidance document on what to look for when you're looking for a filter. We also do have some handouts on this at our table too. If you do buy a filter, make sure that you follow the manufacturer's instructions for how and when to change out that filter cartridge, just to make sure you're getting optimum use out of it. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the next speaker, but if you want some general information on lead in drinking water, MDH does have a website that you can access through this QR code, or we do have a handout back at our table as well. And then if you have any questions after this meeting that you don't get answered or something comes up that you didn't think of, you can always email me as well, and I'm happy to help. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
I'll just welcome up next HPU's General Manager, Luke Peterson.
Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. Well, thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for taking time out of your evening. And also thank Ashton and Hannah from St. Louis County Public Health and the Minnesota Department of Health for taking time out of their evenings and coming to talk to us here in Hibbing about this important issue. And yes, while a lot of this lead action level exceedance stuff is required, I also think there's a strong moral compass about getting the education out to the whole community about the situations that we're dealing with now as a community. All you have to do is Google Flint, Michigan, and see the issues that that water system had a number of years ago, and that whole issue affecting the people of Flint is what led into the federal EPA taking a higher interest on lead to make sure that the bad decisions that they made in Flint didn't impact other people around the country. So while there is a requirement and a compliance element to this, there's also a moral obligation, I would say, to educate our community about the situations that we have here in Hibbing. we have a couple slides prepared, about what we're doing specifically, but I wanted to just stress that this meeting is for you to have your questions answered. And so I want to make sure that we're having enough time to have those questions asked and answered so that you can go home and feel like you learned something. There's a lot of expertise in the room as well, so I'd like to take advantage of that. We have Corey Mathiasen from the Department of Health, who basically supervises the statewide entire lead servicing line. We have Chad Colstead, who's integrally involved with the funding of lead service line replacement projects around the state. We also have our mayor, Senator Farnsworth, our public utilities commissioners, other engineering staff, both internal and external, here in the room as well. So this is your meeting. We want to make sure that you have some information. So are there any questions that anybody has at this point? Elliot? I think the question is, how do you get your water tested? You hear me? Okay. The first thing to do is to make sure that you get identified what is the service line material that you have coming in. That's the first step. So when Hannah mentioned those 29 samples that were part of the overall system, those were known lead samples. So they had lead service lines coming in there. And it's on a slide down the way that we have a number of places that have identified the customer side, the lead of the service line as being lead, and some of those that are still unknown. If your address is unknown, the first thing to do is we have to inventory your service line. So call in, check on the website that the Department of Health staff has to see what your service line is. That's the first part. The second part is even though we can detect what's coming into your house relatively easily, although you'd be surprised at the people that didn't respond to the postcards and the door knocking and the things like that we were doing to try to get that identified. But there's oftentimes the service line that connects to the main can't be detected except by excavation. So we can see what's in your basement where your water line comes in, but we can't see what's between the shutoff point in your yard or the boulevard and the water main. So each of those has to be inspected hands-on too. And these are new rules, new regulations, everyone's trying to grapple with this. We have just started to do the potholing. And we had, in the Department of Health, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, is trying to figure out how to help people pothole for the utility side, because the funding so far has only been allowed for lead service line replacement for the most part. So I think it's really to try to how to get that. So your question is how to get your water tested. To answer your question, I think the first thing is to identify your lead or your service line material and then contact the public utility to do that. And we will then get you a test if it's necessary based on the pipe material. Another question over here.
So as a public utility, do you guys, do they pay for, or do they come out and do that check?
Yeah.
At no cost?
So if you have a lead service line, we will get your water tested.
Right, well, I'm talking about checking that line though. Because I mean,
Oh.
I responded to a postcard.
Yeah.
And because I have copper from my shut off to my basement floor, and I said, well, I'm in the clear because I have copper. And then I got a thing back saying, yeah, well, we don't know if that's all the way out to the street. I'm like, all right.
Right.
So how do you check that?
Could I hand that over to Corey? Can I call in the audience here? Or Chad? I'm sorry, I don't want to put you guys.
Just to give a summary of what the question was here. So we had a gentleman who had completed the postcard when the service line inventory had gone out. The customer side of the line was identified, and now we are looking at the utility side as well. And so, yeah, on top of that.
I almost got the impression, like I said though, that so from the shut off at the boulevard to my water meter in the house, like I said, I said it was copper because I could see it going into the floor, and then I thought the response was, yeah, well, we don't know if it's copper all the way to that boulevard. Who checks to say find out what that is.
Yep, so who will be performing the test to identify both the utility side and the customer side of the service line?
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to talk a little bit further away. So first off, I'm Chad Colstead, Infrastructure Unit Supervisor at the Department of Health. It's a great question. You know, every utility is a little bit different. In Hibbing, there's two ownership parts to the service line. So the city owns from the water main to that shut-off valve or the curb stop in your yard. And then you own from your curb stop into the house. So typically construction practices, it's the same construction material on each side of those. So in your case, you can look in the basement and assume from your basement to that curb stop is one material. But the material that was put in from the water main to the curb stop might have taken place earlier at a different time. So it's uncertain necessarily, you know, if Hibbing didn't have records when that was installed or whatever, they don't know what that is. So that's why you'd see it as unknown on that tool if you looked at it.
So,
If it's unknown, the only way to really identify it, and Luke talked about this a little bit, is you have to actually, and so did Hannah, that you actually have to dig a hole, pothole, that's what he's referring to, potholing.
Sure.
Get down and get your eyes on that pipe to make a determination. So Hibbing's working to kind of do that. They will take care of that. That's not on you to figure that out. I don't know if that answers your question.
and kind of, I mean, just to kind of clarify, and maybe I'm just an idiot, but so I'm saying, if I could see that it's copper from my shut-off valve in my house into my floor, am I safe in saying that it's copper to that curb stop?
So the follow-up question then is the customer side of the line from the curb stop to the water meter, is that always going to be consistent with what the utility side of the line is?
No.
No,
Again,
I know what you're asking.
Okay.
So basically, you're asking from that curb stop or the shut-off valve into your house.
Yes,
Is it safe to say that material is copper all the way to the curb stop?
because I can
In
see.
9 out of 10 cases, I would say yes.
Okay.
You never know what happened, if there would have been a break over the years and someone patched it in with something weird.
Sure,
But typically, yeah, that's how it's, what we're assuming.
thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Another question right behind.
Thank you.
Okay, kind of the same situation for this gentleman here, but I also added a couple of big water filters to help out. So just figured that anything that keeps the lead out and whatever else that flows through that water system, so try to filter it out before it comes to the tap.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like you can add inline filters into your plumbing.
Two of them, one's large and one's smaller.
Okay.
When you go through the first one, you see what it catches, then the second one stays a little clear, a lot longer, so I'm catching a lot.
Okay. And I think the public health experts would say make sure that those filters are the right certification for lead.
Part of it, I don't know if it's, you gotta get them from Lowe's, or whatever the micron filter is, but whether it's a lead type, I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Anything to help out.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on that a little bit. So, you know, I think next time you buy your filters, just take a look at the box. And usually it'll say if it removes lead or not. But I think the bigger thing is just make sure you're replacing on the frequency that the manufacturer recommends.
And you buy every 2 months,
Yep, so then you should be good.
you know, try to do the right thing.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. There was one more question. First of all, one lady back here, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't know your name, but Elliot, can you bring them up?
Yeah, we're gonna start using the microphone so you guys can get onto the recording here.
So if they potholed your house,
I mean,
can they see what the pipe was?
Yes.
So if we haven't heard anything, then they're gonna say it's okay, or,
Did your house get potholed? that you
Yes.
know? Okay. That should be reflected, Andy, Luke, that's currently updated on the state inventory, correct? So after we're done with the public session here, Corey and the folks from Hannah will be at the table back there. We can look up your house and that information should be entered already on the statewide database.
all right, thanks.
Okay, so coming back over here, we had one question from this gentleman, at least what I saw here.
So if you dropped off a water sample,
I get you to the microphone here.
if you drop off a water sample, how soon should you hear a result, and will your home get a test result sent to you or called you?
The water testing that we're talking about is very specific and controlled by the public utilities. So we would have to go and give you a sample bottle, and then we would come and pick it up. Oh, you dropped it off, okay. And so you dropped it off. Did you get a result back?
It's been a number of months.
A number of months, so your water was tested, but you haven't heard back. Before you leave today, I'd like to get your address just to make sure we can get that information communicated to you. Okay, great, thank you. I think this gentleman in the back, I'm trying to maintain and apologize if I'm not going in the correct order, but this is exactly what we want to have your questions answered in the room, and then we'll come up here to the front row. Thank you.
All right, so, pardon me, if it helps anyone else, we're 2100 block of 11th Avenue East. They potholed in front of the house, gave us a water kit, we tested it. We did get the results, 7.8 parts per billion, but we really haven't gotten much information other than then PUC gave us a water filter and said, best practice is to filter the water. I don't know yet if the lead is on the city side from the pothole test, but maybe now we know to check the website on that. But my question would be, what happens next? Do you have an answer on that part yet?
That's a really good question. In part,
Thank you.
Yes, depending on where your house was on that, and I don't know it off the top of my head where 11th Avenue is in regard to a replacement. If it was part of the blocks that were considered more than 30% lead, it is in the planning queue to be, the whole water main be replaced. So of the known homes on your block, if there are more than 30% of those homes that are known lead, we are going to, at least this fall, based on the funding availability, we stop testing if we reach that 30% mark, because we are just going to assume that that whole block is lead for purposes of water main replacement. How many blocks do we have in Hibbing? I think we have something like 80 blocks in total, off the top of my head. We tested roughly, Luke, how many blocks did we test this summer? How many blocks did we touch? About 7?
We've got 13 that are at 80% threshold.
Okay, so 13 blocks. We still have almost 65 blocks. Can you imagine that? 65 blocks in the city of Hibbing that we have to get eyes visual inspection on that surface line material, both on either the private side or the public side. Meanwhile, there's folks with known lead service lines that, I don't know about you, but I'd want to get my service line replaced as soon as possible. So that's where we're at. And we also have the staff that we have, and we also have the funding that we have. So this is just the beginning of what we're calling the Get the Lead Out plan for Hibbing. The Department of Health has a plan to get lead out in 10 years. With us reaching the level of lead indications we have in just those 13 blocks that we were able to pothole this fall, we have a big need in Hibbing. And it isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to be next year. It's going to be on a block by block, house by house basis. It will take time. It will take focus, but doggone it, we're going to do it because there's no other option.
Has anything been done up at Kelly Lake?
I think the question you asked is what has been identified for Kelly Lake. Off the top of my head, I don't want to say anything untrue. Anybody else from staff who can say anything intelligent? Let's check the lead service line inventory after, just so we can talk about specific information.
I might stop over and pick up a sample bottle and run some.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good, I want to get to this gentleman here down in front here. Do you mind speaking into the microphone so we can get it on public access TV?
I guess my first question is, why were the lead levels allowed to get as high as they are? And with those 6 samples that you have, what is the average between the parts per billion in each of those beautiful samples? And what was the highest level of lead that has been found within the city of Hibbing, because even at 32 parts per billion, that is quite significant. And knowing that the EPA accepts absolutely 0 parts per billion has me wondering, why did it take this long to even get a town hall meeting going, almost 5 months, 6 months after the fact that we have even received any kind of notification? You're talking about getting the lead out. This is not getting the lead out. This is being slow.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you 100%. These samples were taken primarily during the month of June, if I'm not mistaken. And if I recall, this is January right now, so 6 months after the fact that these lines were taken. So I'd like to give it over to the Department of Health and let them talk a little bit about the process. I do want to say too that this is the first year that we've tested under the current requirements, which are to test only the lead known homes. And the way that the testing requirements have also changed is that we're supposed to, that the requirement is to take as high risk or most likely to hit lead, versus in the past, we would drop off samples of water and it was much more loose in terms of how, what the requirements were for that water testing. This is the first time that the rules have been changed, and I'm with you that for the right reasons, to test houses that are at most at risk for lead and test in a way that you can't, quote unquote, water it down. We have to take the first draw of the water after it's been sitting in the pipes for overnight. Now, most of us, I mean, I remember when I was taught to make coffee from my grandma, she said, run the water until it's cold. You know, I think we all learned that. My kids don't know that, they'll fill up the pot right away. And the reason is because I think some of those old timers just assumed you gotta flush out stuff that's been laid in the pipes. That's not to give any specific information about public utilities, but we are under a new testing regime that is more targeting the highest risk and the most likely to trigger the positive lead result now. So we're testing water as it's been dormant in pipes at least 8 hours. First draw, not filtered, not necessarily what you would consume, but something that will trigger more lead results. So that's kind of how we're getting to the levels of lead that we have. The second of all is lead was quite common. And it was quite common, not as much on the water main side, just because of the size. It's more on the smaller pipes, the smaller lines, the service lines, maybe a couple joints, a couple lead solder things. So the majority of the lead in Hibbing is going to be inside of people's homes. Or
what about apartment buildings?
exactly, yes.
I live in an apartment building, I have a daughter, I have a pet. Everybody needs fresh water, and I don't even know what the lead level would be where I live. Be nice to know and get a number for that, so I can do the adequate things to protect myself and my family. But again, why did it take so long to get to this point?
Yep. And I agree that with the water samples that we took in June, it took till October till we got the notice through the whole process to start getting the word out. That is a little bit, sorry, can you hear me? All right. And I apologize for some of that. That is just kind of the process that we're in with the Department of Health and our public notification. But I'm really glad that we have this scheduled today, that we can start educating you all and keep moving forward on how we gotta get going. I agree, this has taken way too long.
Yeah, just a quick question. Does Public Utilities or the city have a map of where the testing sites throughout the city were done?
So the individual water test results are not, are they public information? It's confidential information. So short answer to that question is no. But I can say that on the tool that Corey and Chad had talked about, that information is public and that it identifies where the lead service lines are. And the tests were taken only at places where it is a known lead line.
Sure, okay, so I live in, I did this, look at your inlet, but actually, I don't think, when I got the postcard in the mail, I don't think I actually got it where it was actually coming through my wall, because it's sort of an isolated place. I live in a home that's built in 1934. And I've been told, we don't know if your neighborhood is safe or not safe, or safe or not safe. So I took a water sample to an independent lab in Virginia, I had it tested. So should I still come to the city, get a test bottle, and do it with the city?
We still need to identify the lead service, the metal, or the material of your service line. So, short answer is yes, come through that service line identification process.
Sure.
So if you can get eyes on and see that your pipe coming out of the wall or out of the floor is copper,
Sure.
your side is done. Mind you, there's still the public side of that, the pipe that's coming from the main to your shutoff valve in the boulevard, or wherever you're at, that we still have to get visually inspected. So if you go to that tool that we've been talking about from the U of M, you'll be able to see the customer side of the line material and the public side of the line material.
Okay.
Oh,
I was just gonna say, but I was told at the time, the city, this was like last fall, the city didn't know what that public side was.
I would bet you a Coke right now, that's probably still the case.
Okay.
Just because the potholing is quite extensive.
Sure.
You would know if a vacuum truck had gone to your yard and dug a big hole in it, you would probably still see that.
Okay.
So my guess is we probably did not identify the public side.
Okay.
So that is still something that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question, so last summer you guys did a lot of work on 23rd Street, doing some big major renovations, and my understanding is that will happen again this summer on 23rd Street, closer to the Lincoln School. One of the ladies that spoke earlier said that construction can kind of conjure up some of this stuff in the water line, so is that, if we're gonna be in that construction zone this summer, is that something we should be aware of, like, moving forward? I think our service line to our home was found to be lead and it was replaced by accident, thankfully, like last year, but just thinking ahead for when this summer construction goes on, is that something we need to be aware of?
Absolutely. I mean, wherever we do water main breaks, not even just on that, wherever we do water main replacement projects, construction, and also you have to remember, we have a lot of water breaks in Hibbing as well. So that whole instance of churning up what's latent in the pipes, that happens when we do water breaks and water break repairs as well. So that, so short answer is yes, that's something to be aware of. What I'd recommend to you is, first of all, still identify the service line that you do have, make sure known what it is, and then when we have known construction in the area, please pay attention. We've been very vocal and public about where our construction is taking place, so pay attention to that. And then just be prepared to flush your lines, or like let the water run for sure, take those steps that we're talking about today to make sure that you're not drinking any dirty water or things like that. And so I know sometimes we do have a lot of iron distillate in our pipes as well, so when you'll see construction going on, and I just asked some of the people affected by that, there was some more iron-rich water that kind of came out of that, and I would say continue to flush that and not drink it. Also having a filter, especially if you're in the older section of town.
I'm with Real Life South, and over the past 5 or 6 years or so, they've done taken 2 water samples there, and both of them are over 20 ppps. And right now, we are giving serious consideration to putting in a lead filter system that would run one system that would protect all 22 units over there. And my question is, do you have a handle as to how efficient a lead filter really works?
I personally do not, but if I can talk, so hand it over to Chad or Hannah. If you remember, Chad had recommended to make sure that the filters are certified for lead and that they're replaced at the frequency. But can you talk about the efficiency, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about the efficiency of the lead filter to a point. It's kind of dependent on what, who it's manufactured by. Most of the boxes, if you look at a filter, will tell tell you kind of the percentage removal of that filter, and as long as replacing it is recommended by the manufacturer, you should be okay. On a larger filter like that, you just have to kind of watch. It's probably more based on flow than it is time frame, to make sure that you're not exceeding the flow for a filter that size. That all being said, is this like a 22 unit apartment complex or living facility? You know, that probably is not a lead service line. Anything over 2 inches is typically not lead. So a unit that size probably is served by a line considerably bigger than 2 inch, I would think, Luke. So you're probably you maybe might be safe to say it's not a lead service line.
Yeah, the incoming line is greater than 2 inches, and the unit is only about 14 years old. So from that respect, I think the incoming lines, et cetera, are adequate for lead. It's just that when they did the water samples over the past 5-6 years, 2 of them have been, one was 21 and the other one was 25 ppb, something like that. So, like I say, we're planning on putting in a lead filter, and I'm just wondering how efficient they are. So.
Yeah, and Hannah brought up too that it could have been specific to a fixture in your building itself. There's kind of certain requirements for what's called lead-free for years, and lead-free definition varied over the years. So even though it was maybe lead-free at a certain time frame, there was still some lead in that fixture. So it was probably more fixture specific than building specific. It's not, we can't say that for sure, but it might have been just specific fixtures where you're taking those samples where the lead was leaching from that particular fixture, like a faucet or something.
Well, I know the city flushes the line out there at least once a year, sometimes 2 times in the summer. I presume you're flushing them to get the lead out. So.
It still doesn't answer though the question of like how actually efficient the things are that that gentleman is asking. He's asking for how efficient they are.
Like I said,
honestly, you're dancing around the question and the answer for it. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one, but we want straight answers, not beating around the bush here.
Right. Well, again, it's based on the manufacturer of the particular filter. I can't tell you exactly percentage removal. Right? It's my understanding most of these work kind of as a pass-through, kind of an absorptive media type situation. So based on the amount of water that flows through that filter, it picks up the lead, picks up the particulates. And if you don't replace it frequently enough, it all push through. If you're replacing it on a routine basis like you're supposed to, you should not be getting lead coming through that filter. So I don't say it's 100% efficient, but for the most part, it should be everything.
Thanks, Chad. I'm David Jones. I work for the Minnesota Department of Health as well. My unit does something different, but we handle a lot of questions about filtration and water treatment as well. And I would say that Chad is right. To talk about efficiency is a challenging thing because it depends on what's in the water, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, it depends system by system, but also efficiency changes over time during the life of the filter, et cetera. So I think the best advice is to select the right filter given what you're trying to accomplish, knowing what's in the water to begin with. And my thought was to just suggest, especially if you're using a large system and you have enough people to pay for this, et cetera, it might be better to work with a water treatment professional. Somebody like a Culligan or somebody like that, they design systems, particularly larger ones that handle a larger flow, et cetera. They will consider what's in your water, they'll sample it, they'll say, what are your goals? We're trying to take the lead out, maybe there's something else we also want to treat for taste or something else, maybe there's volatile organics, we want to put carbon on there to remove those. And they'll design a system for you. And then they'll consider like, what's your flow through rate, you know, how much water use do you have over time, et cetera, how often you have to change things out. So it is kind of a complicated thing. It sounds like we're dancing around, but it's hard to answer like a black and white thing. So I think it really does depend on the system, what's in the water, and what you're willing to spend for it as well. And I do think in some cases, working with a professional is a good bit of advice rather than do it yourself. And then you have to understand what's on the manufacturer's instructions, et cetera. Sometimes that's a little technical. I would say if you're trying to do it yourself though, talk to the people, whoever, you know, if you're at a Home Depot or Lowe's or something, ask if they have somebody who really knows that, and then try and contact the company too, maybe look at their webpage, their materials before you buy, because otherwise you might be stuck with it, it's not what you want. So it may take some research as well, but there can be a lot that goes into it. It's simply lead and that's all you're trying to do, it's somewhat straightforward, but not even straightforward in all cases.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the questions out there, and that is kind of the challenge that we have too, is like just getting all the education out. So again, thank you for all the questions, because if you can kind of share what you learned tonight or still haven't had answers on, you know, also keep perpetuating that too, because that's what we want to get. We want to get the public to be well informed about the issues of getting the lead out. So I think we have more questions in the audience here. Yes?
So I just wrote this down because but I just first wanted to thank HPU for being upfront and making us aware, and I recognize that with an aging infrastructure in the US as a whole, this is not an issue that's unique to Hibbing specifically, and that I also recognize that the people at HPU are drinking the same water that we are, and second, I just wanted to bring up that my niece, who's 1.5, lives in Chisholm, but has daycare in Hibbing, and her grandparents are in Hibbing, and also spends time at our house, which is in Hibbing. And she recently had blood tests done, and it did come back positive for lead, which we now know has irreversible effects on the central nervous system. And she's doing okay in general, and they just did testing again and found that there was no traceable lead the second time she was tested. So, and I recognize that just like when we're doing construction projects on our house, it's limited by time and resources and money. So my question is, I know that we're doing a lot as Hibbing to make progress and accomplish these things that are incredibly cost intensive, but is there any funding on the state or federal level specifically for things like this that we can apply for or that we can advocate for as community members?
First of all, that is our main goal, is to make sure that we can get the word out to everybody, especially for young kids, to get the tests done that they need to have done and follow the regular pediatric care. I know my kids are much older now. When they were then, that regular checkup with pediatricians and doing those tests does identify those issues that you can take ahead of time. Second of all, there is funding, but it is limited for the lead service line replacement. So this year we replaced just under 30 lead service lines as part of our construction projects, and we had a specific project just for lead line replacements. We will be getting another chunk of funding for next year, but it goes very quick. And when I mentioned it's $1 million for the whole city of Hibbing, which sounds like a lot of money, but when replacing a service line, hello, can you hear me? When replacing a service line costs $20,000 to $30,000 a service line with 6,500 people living, that's going to cost upwards of a lot more than $1 million can do, certainly within a number of years. So finding ways that we can get more of that funding, because what's likely going to happen too is that the funding will run out, and the people who have their lead service lines replaced while the funding's available are great, but the people left holding the bag when the funding runs out are going to have to pay for this on their own, because most of the lead issues are on the homeowner side of the line and not on the utility side. So that's why it's really important to make sure we get everything identified as soon as possible, so we can make a strong case to the Department of Health and other funders out there to completely get the lead out of Hibbing. Because it's really important as an aging community, as a community that has had a great past, we need to leave this city and this community better off for those young kids in the future. We need to actually take care of this so that we're not leaving that legacy that has been left to us to deal with now. So, thank you. I'm going to go to this gentleman who's raised his hand a couple times and I haven't called on yet, and we'll come back to you.
Okay, I have two questions. All right, the first one is, first of all, I believe I have a galvanized steel service line. The utility updater that I got about a week ago said the primary source of lead across Hibbing's water system is lead or galvanized steel water service line. So my question is, that's something new. everything else I'd read, it didn't say anything about a problem with galvanized steel. So what is the issue with galvanized that can contain lead or store lead, or what is the status of that?
Yeah, great question. From what I understand, and I'm not the chemist, but galvanized pipes act like lead, or there is a magnetic type approach. So I'm going to pass it over to the experts here to answer it specifically.
So it's a good question, so thanks for bringing that up. But there's a lot of communities that deal with galvanized lines. We actually call them galvanized required replacement for the sole reason that, galvanized is a hard fixed pipe and it's connected to a water main, right? So you got this hard pipe on one side, hard pipe on another. Because of that, because where we live in this state, where we live in the nation, we actually have to have a connector between the water main and the galvanized pipe. So when it goes through freeze thaw cycles and stuff, it has to be able to expand and contract. That material is typically lead. So there's a lead connector between the water main and the galvanized pipe. And when that lead leaches into the water, it will build up actually on the galvanized pipe. So then the galvanized pipe is almost like a lead service line. So that's kind of what happened. Is there's this connector that connects the water main to your galvanized pipe. And there's actually lead in that connector that's now accumulating in your galvanized pipe.
I guess I'm not 100% following you. So if there was lead on the water main, are you saying then the lead could
No, I
attach to the galvanized?
I wish I could draw a picture for you, but so if you look at your street, right, the pipe, the big water main runs through the street. And then to connection for each of the houses, that's the service line that we're talking about. So there's usually not lead in the water main, big pipe out in the street. Between the house and the water main, so the water main and the house is where your service line is. Galvanized, just like copper or lead, it runs from the water main to the house. The only thing with galvanized, because it's such a hard, fixed metal, you can't connect it directly to another pipe. So from the water main, usually about 3 feet from the water main, there's a lead connector. So the lead connector kind of elbows up, so if that galvanized line has to move a little bit, allows some flexibility. So it was a good thing. It was intended to help out, make sure that line lasts longer and make sure that it's flexible and stuff, but it is lead. So because of that little piece of lead in that service line itself, it makes that whole line basically like a lead service line. Does that help?
Are you saying there's where it connects a few feet from the water main? Shouldn't that have not been lead? Shouldn't that have been a different material in the first place?
When it was kind of standard practice when it happened, at that time they used lead for that purpose, right? Because that's all they had. They didn't really use copper back then. They used lead for that connection material. Sometimes it's related to what was happening in history at that time. There was not maybe as much copper because of other things going on. So that's why they needed some kind of flexible connector. And just at that time in building standards, that was just lead material. So that's why that lead came from.
Okay. The next question. Beyond the valve from the service line in the basement, I have copper. However, more than likely it's been there since 1972, so there's a good chance they were sweated and soldered with lead-based solder. How bad can that lead, isn't that going to be just as bad as, say, a lead service line? I would think not, because there's not going to be as much lead exposure, but how big of a potential is there for elevated lead to be in those old copper sweated lines, from lead?
But I can definitely touch on that a little bit. So of course the biggest source of lead is the service line material itself, right? But it's going to be like a multi-pronged approach for lead-free and inhibiting, right? So the first thing is, first and foremost, replace all the lead service lines. And that same path, the city is working on a corrosion control plan. It's actually going to feed a certain chemical into your drinking water. Perfectly safe. It's many cities across the state use this to reduce the corrosion effects of the water on those piping. So in the end, once you get all the lead service lines out, this will help coat the pipes in your house so that it won't be able to impact that lead solder. So it should help reduce the lead concentrations in your water that are coming off of that lead solder. You still, if it sits long enough, you're still gonna get some lead from that lead solder, but I think the big thing is flush your water in the morning. You make sure it's cold, make sure you're running it before you drink it. I think that, especially for the internal plumbing, lead solder in the house is a good way to eliminate that concern. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So, again, the galvanized lines, I'll just kind of recap. The galvanized is treated exactly like lead due to some historical practices that were done, as well as the chemical properties on the actual galvanized coating itself. It acts just like lead, so we treat it just like lead, according to the current rules. And then, again, if I can just reiterate, our number one thing we can do today is identify our service lines, know what we have, and then start planning for the future, which also includes making sure you're properly running your water, especially if you're in an older home. I want to come back to you. I just want to make sure, is there anybody else who hasn't asked a question yet? Because we have some prepared materials I want to walk through, and then we'll come back to the Q&A, and then we're going to be around a little bit after. So, any other questions? Or go ahead, right back there.
Hello, so in regard to reducing our exposure to lead, I have a filter on my sink.
Yeah.
But when it comes to washing dishes and whatnot, should I be using that filter to wash my dishes?
Excellent question. I'm going to hand it over to Hannah from the Department of Health.
Yeah, good question. So typically we recommend that you don't run the filter when you wash your dishes, and that's just to extend the life of the filter. So Chad mentioned that some duration depends on the flow. So if you use the filter when you're washing your dishes, that'll reduce the amount of time that you can use that filter before you have to replace it.
Thank you.
All right, and then I think we have our last question of this segment, and there will be more Q&A after we read the prepared remarks, but let's have this one last question. Let's go to slides.
All right, so you mentioned funding. Now, money is hard nowadays with the economy and everything that it is. How much funding is Minnesota Department of Health or any other kind of federal or local or any kind of funding coming in, if you have a number, and how much of it is actually going to hurt us as taxpayers in return? Because that is a huge issue as it is already, considering all the rising costs of rent, water, electricity, and not to mention food.
Yeah, no, that is a really good question. As you know, there is no such thing as a free lunch. My goal while General Manager Hibbing is to get as much money from outside of the area to help rebuild this community that built the modern century through its history of mining. So my goal is I want to get outside money to fix the problems that we have based on our history. So, but with that, I think if Chad, can I throw you this question? And I apologize, you've been doing yeoman's duty here today. But Chad is the money guy, so he's the guy we got to talk to.
So again, good question, I appreciate that. So for Minnesota specifically, the state actually provided $240 million in 2023 and another $3 million this past session for lead service line replacement. We partner that right now with about $200 million of federal dollars. So that being said, it's a lot of money, right? It sounds like a lot of money. We have probably 100,000 lead service lines to replace in the state, and the average cost is about $25,000 per service line, especially with the numbers in the metro. So we're looking at $2.5 billion, and we roughly, by the time it's all said and done, we're going to get next year funding from the federal government. We'll have about $500 million. So we're about, honestly, $2 billion short of our goal so far to replace all the lead in Minnesota alone, let alone the rest of the nation.
So how do you assure that we can actually get that extra money to secure Hibbing from all the lead because, like, these gals here said, it's like the damage is irreversible. And it's not an overnight thing. So how long is this going to, this fixing problem going to take? Because, I mean, eventually people are just going to either leave Hibbing or just honestly give up or lose all faith and hope in, no offense, but HPU and the city in itself.
Right. No, I think that's a valid question. I think the big thing to focus on too is that Hibbing's working on this corrosion control plan, which even if you have a lead service line, if you do proper corrosion control, you definitely will reduce your lead levels below the standards, the action level exceedances that Hannah talked about. So they're kind of doing that. That's a high priority for them, I know that. Right? I mean, and they're doing a lot of due diligence to identify as many of the service lines as they can. This isn't just a Hibbing problem though. It is a statewide problem. I mean, Minneapolis has 40,000 lead service lines alone. They're doing the same thing. They're trying to optimize their corrosion control treatment. All these communities are. You know, it's a national problem. It's not just even a state problem. So we're doing our best we can. We're going to need more money. I mean, the legislature in 2023 set a goal to replace all the lead service lines in Minnesota. In order to do that, we're going to need more state funds, and hopefully more federal funds will come down the pipeline at some point too. It has to come from somewhere though. I know you mentioned that as well. So it's balancing those priorities.
And our personal view at HPU is to make sure that while the funding's available, that we're pushing to get as much of it for Hibbing itself. I know Duluth got $60 million for lead service lines, and we got one. So we need to change that, and it's no fault of the Department of Health per se, but we need to get that money coming to northern Minnesota here to the Iron Range and to Hibbing in particular, because that's where the problem is. That's what I'm responsible for delivering to you, and ultimately that's the community need that I see around here. So, anybody else that'd like to say something about funding? Oh, Commissioner Bayless.
Can you just comment on the impact to ratepayers as of now? Because we have put some money towards this, towards exploration.
That's correct. So as of today, Hibbing Public Utilities has spent its full allotment, both either cash out the door or reserve funds, for the lead service lines that were identified in the last round for lead service line replacement. So that $1 million is completely spoken for already. The utility dipped into its own operating budget to pay for more potholing, because we also know that to get the public available funds for Hibbing is going to require us to get more of the utility side of that known, so that we spent $300,000 that was unearmarked dollars this fall. The commission approved that to continue potholing to help solve this problem. We also, this kind of is icing on the cake, or the straw that broke the camel's back, and I don't know how you want to talk about it, but as you know, we've been talking about a long time, Hibbing has 100 miles of water lines with the average age of installed before World War II. This is what happens when we have this old of a system that hasn't been maintained the way Hibbing's system has been. So we are at a crisis point, I'd say, for our infrastructure throughout Hibbing, and this is something that is going to require that capital improvement plan or water line replacement projects continue, and also accelerate to continue to meet the need to replace lead service line. Because as we've discovered, of the 13 blocks we potholed, 80% of them were more than 30% lead. So in what I call urban Hibbing, the really nice part around the memorial building here, we have to realize that a good chunk of those are going to have a high number of lead service lines on the public side in addition to the private side. So over the next 10 years, we are going to have to replace every single water main in this part of town, which means that we have to make sure we can work with the city so we can plan accordingly, that that we're not paving over streets that we have to dig up the next year. That when we're exposing the subterranean infrastructure, we're also replacing the sewer lines that need to be replaced if they need to be replaced, or the storm sewers, or other problems that we have. So it is kind of a call to rejuvenate infrastructure planning and development for the long-term viability of the community. So that's our personal view. Sorry for the quick diatribe. And I said that was going to be the last question before I go to the prepared remarks. So, yes?
Yeah, I want to make, Mayor Hager, I just want to say that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Can you everybody hear me? Okay. I just want to say we are taking modern approaches to both water line and sewer, both sanitary and storm. We're lining rather than replacing, which saves a ton of money. It goes much further, and I know Luke is doing that with water line services too, where it's large enough to line. I don't know, it saves in the millions, I know that. So we are doing everything we can to stretch our dollar. Modern technology is a wonderful thing when you can use it. Most of the time you can. Unfortunately, correct me if I'm wrong, service lines, this is not an option. But what we do on our main lines, it makes a difference. So it does save us a ton of money, and I don't know what you saved just in the one that went under the golf course. Maybe you could just comment on that.
The relining project, at least half of the cost on a water main project under traditional methods is the restoration. Putting the dirt back, putting the pavement back, putting the sidewalk and curb back. So the more that you're minimizing the times that you're actually digging into, you have to do that, is better. So I'd say like it's about half, we save at least half of the cost. So on a $5 million project, that would have been $10 million if we didn't reline it, just due to restoration costs in the normal neighborhood.
Thank you, and I just want to mention, and that's why I wanted to mention it, so that you understand we are taking this very seriously. We are stretching the dollar to the max of what we can to get the best bang for the buck.
Absolutely, thank you, Mayor. Yes, no, it's been a great partnership with the City of Nivik. So let's go to these prepared remarks here. Real quickly here, I think we've talked a lot about this. October 22nd, that was the date that we published the lead exceedance level. As the other member of the audience had mentioned, that was due to the testing that was done this summer. And as we also mentioned, this is due to new rules that were coming down from the federal EPA that are still in effect about how we test for lead. We're not testing averages anymore, we're testing where there's the highest amount of risk. And lead service lines and interior plumbing are the #1 source of lead poisoning in municipal water systems. Work to date, we've approved the water main improvement plan in November of 2022. That started some of this long-term planning. These lead service rules have been coming out around the same time. October 2024, we replaced 15 service lines. We were finished replacing a number of those this summer. December 2025, we started this system-wide response plan, which I agree has taken too long. It is just the time that things take sometimes as well. So we want to get this information out soon, and please do everything you can to share this information and have anybody with more questions reach out to the folks on public health, both in the county and at the state level, as well as us at the utility to help answer these questions. Step 1 is investigation. We are required by a federal change in rules to do this. We also believe that we don't do just what's required, that we're doing this to make sure we're leaving the best water system for our future and the future communities we can, and that gives us a moral imperative to tackle lead in our water anyway. We have to identify the at-risk residents, which, as Ashton mentioned, are especially the young children because they're at the earliest stage, and if you think kids are like sponges, they will soak up everything around them. And that's why the pediatric care is very important. And then continuing to collect data and make sure we can prioritize and better plan for replacing all of these service lines in the future. And also making sure we can maximize outside funding coming from the state of Minnesota or federal resources. Yes, it is coming from taxpayers eventually, but right now my charge is the ratepayers here in Hibbing. The service line inventory, we started that in March of 2024. As we mentioned, some earlier questions, go to that site. It's available on the Public Utilities Facebook. We will post it again. Stop at the table and see what your house is here tonight so you can get that answer. And if it is unknown, which I would venture to guess, the majority of our utility side connections are unknown. It's assumed that it will have a high probability of being lead for right now. And that number is over 6,000 at the moment. We'll get to that number in a minute. But information is our most important goal right now, and which is why we are here today. This is a picture, if you can see it with the light, this is a picture of a vacuum truck from Bagalis Construction here. This big long hose is sucking out the dirt to expose the material that is more than 6 feet down that is going to the home, so that we can see both sides, the public side and the privately owned side of the water service line. So we can actually have eyes on it and detect the physical composition of that service line material. This right now is the best available process. The alternative is sending out a backhoe to dig a big hole, but what happens when you send a backhoe on these urban streets, you get everything else that comes with a backhoe, which means a bigger hole, meaning it's going to cost more, it's going to take more time, it's going to be more messy. You're not going to want it in your front yard. The holes for the potholing, they're still big. They're still, Paul, how big is the diameter of a potholing hole? 2 by 2, so it's more like a manhole cover. You know, so that's still in your yard or in the boulevard. It's still going to be inconvenience, but it's going to be a lot easier to fill in and less intrusive as we keep potholing in the spring once the frost comes out of the ground.
Makes it a whole lot more efficient.
It makes it a whole lot more efficient, yes. That said, remember we have almost 6,000 service lines. It's going to take a lot of vac trucks and a lot of sucking out of dirt to get this all identified. And that's just to identify it. Then comes the replacement size. And then we are prioritizing based on the age of the neighborhood and the results of the service line inventory. So we're taking kind of a prioritized approach to get everything we need to. And it takes about 30 minutes, is that true? A little longer to fill the dirt back in. So that is a pretty quick hit process, about as best as we can come up with so far. So this is what we've reported. If you've had those postcards in the mail or someone came to your home and tested and went in and looked at your pipe, on the customer side, on the homeowner side, we have 3,600 identified as non-lead service lines and just under 2,000 unknowns yet. I'd like to have that number be 0 by the end of the summer. So we have about 2,000 individual homeowner sides of the line that we need to get into your basements and get in there and see. This number should be 0 soon. In my view, I think we can get that done quick. What's going to take longer is the utility side. So again, just over 5,000 service lines throughout the whole city. We have non-lead identified on the utility side of 829. 76 were identified as needing replacement. So that's on the list of things we got to do. And unknown, we have just about 5,000 left unknown to still figure out. So we got a lot of work to do on the utility side of that. So how we're going to do that, that's something we'll be talking with the Department of Health, because right now there isn't exactly a program for potholing. So we don't want to dip into operating funds if we don't have to. Step 2, risk reduction. So this is why we're doing today. Information is the first step to make sure that all your questions are coming out here. We need to get to beyond compliance and eliminate all the primary sources of lead, meaning all the actual physical lead out of the system. In 10 years, we can't have any lead in our system. We got to get it out. Corrosion control. So this is a stopgap measure. This was mentioned. Nobody likes to talk about chemicals in waters, but this is exactly what this is. This is an additive that's put into the water treatment process that makes the water inhibiting less absorptive of the lead in the materials. So this is this is treating the system as a whole, and this is something that we're looking at right now. So it would mean the natural water that comes out of the ground here in Hibbing with its strong mineral content is naturally more corrosive, meaning it absorbs the metals that surround it more than water that has a different water chemistry. So this is a pH balancing effect that goes on at the water treatment plant to help eliminate the corrosivity of the water that is naturally occurring. It creates a mineral barrier, and we're expecting to get preliminary recommendations in the next month or so about what exactly we're going to be doing for the corrosivity in the water. So stay tuned to the Public Utilities Commission meetings to talk about that. There's pros and cons, but from a public health perspective, there is only a pro. That's what we're hearing from the experts. It is common across many cities in Minnesota as well. Lead removal process, this is the only way to ultimately get rid of this lead, is to actually eliminate the lead in there. Continuing on, we have 8 blocks identified with more than 30% lead, so this is more where we pothole already. We're not going to pothole every house if we're going to assume we're going to replace the water main for the whole block. So that would be notified in that lead service line inventory as well on the state's website. Funding need. Right now, we already have a $50 million water treatment capital improvement plan. That's just for the water mains alone. We have just under $40 million in water treatment needs in the future as we try to tackle dwindling supplies of fresh water in the Hibbing and the performance of our existing wells, looking elsewhere for a water treatment plant source, and then get the lead out projects. This is going to take at least $10 million to do. This is a shot in the dark at this point, but just knowing the age of our infrastructure, the levels of lead that we've identified, it is going to be at least $10 million. So if Duluth got $60 million and we're roughly, what, 20% of the population of Duluth, did I do that math right? So we should at least get, I'm going to say 30 million. I know, I'm looking at Chad right now. Chad and Rob in the back there. But but seriously, joking aside, we do need to make sure we get as many outside resources to come to Hibbing as we can. And this is just, right now we are looking for over $48 million in external funding. And the difference between that is more than doubling of our water bill. So if we're able to achieve that much, 50% of our funds come from local, 50% come from outside, our water rates will not double. So we need your help in all of that. And then community involvement, just getting the word out, making sure that everyone can prioritize infrastructure funding and take it as a source of pride. 100 years ago when the forefathers built and people built this city, they were proud of their infrastructure. We need to be proud of our infrastructure once again in this state, country, and city. And and the commission are very proud to be in the positions to tackle these issues head on so that we have a system that we can be darn proud of to give the next generations. So that's the statement from my seat. Commission Chair Bayless, anything else you'd like to add to that? Because I think we're getting close to the end of the formal presentation.
If anybody has more questions, I think we can do more Q&A.
All right, do you hear that? Anybody with more questions after this? And then just a reminder, after we wrap up here tonight, folks will still be around. There'll be tables out in the hall with St. Louis County Public Health as well as the State Department of Health. Take a look at that inventory. We got the computer up and running to see, all right, thumbs up, that computer's up and running. You can see the status of your service line. Any other last questions? One more over here and then over there. Oh, over here first.
So I actually had a couple of questions. So it sounds like the potential lead sources could be multifaceted. It could be the public service line, it could be the private service line, and it could be the lead inside the house.
Yes.
The water filters that you speak of, are they whole house filter or individual faucet? how do you work that if you have multiple locations where family members drink water from?
I mean, great question, and if I were keeping track of, there was a couple that we talked about. We had a couple, like the gentleman behind you in the row, I think he has a whole house filter system. He installed 2 filters. On the main line coming in, he has 2 filters that he installed for 2 different stages. So that is treating, if I'm correct, your whole house. Yeah.
But then that's just treating what's coming into the house. It still could be, you still could be sourcing lead from inside your house.
Correct, that's correct. So if you still have those filters and you have lead pipes or lead components of a faucet in your bathroom or your kitchen, or a lead union, which the leads have been commonly more in the bigger parts, like Chad mentioned, like the unions, where they need to be a little more flexible, you know, those things, there's still a risk of lead. But again, just that knowledge is the best thing that you can do, is know what you have. And a filter that can address the whole house doesn't address the upstream impacts of the lead shredding you have, or lead solder you have in your copper.
Okay. The last 2 questions I had were, oh, that's good. The last 2 questions I have kind of, so when you go into an area where you're going to replace the service line, public service line, if people have their own private service lines are also lead and need to be replaced, is there correspondence with that saying, hey, we're going to rip this street up, so you're a private contractor, you can get tied in with to get your line also serviced? And the last question I have, that kind of dovetails off of that, I know that the public utilities a lot of times contracts with, as an example, Regales, to do a lot of water main repairs. Do you guys source information to them? Do they say, oh yeah, we got it all fixed and whatnot, and by the way, we identified that this stretch here appears to be lead line or whatever? So you have that info. You know what I mean?
Yes. So if I can go back to the second question you answered or asked, was the mechanics of a water main replacement project eliminating the public-owned lead line. We would also at that same time make sure before we could hook up, because under our current projects we cannot connect to a lead line. So if there is lead on the customer side, it has to be replaced, at least in the service line. I don't know, Chad, if Hannah, you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, simple answer to that is they have to do a full service line replacement. You can't do a partial replacement. So in order to get the federal and state funding, they have to replace the full service line.
And is that the customer's responsibility then? Or would that be part of that?
Right now, the way the funding package is set up, that the city gets, so the city applies for it, not the individual residents. I want to make that clear first. So the city's applying on behalf of everyone in this room. Is it's set up so it's 100% grant for the private side. And then the public side is a loan, but it also takes the state funds then to pay off the loan, so there's no cost to the water system either. So right now, it's really no cost to the city to do that service line replacement.
Okay, perfect.
To the tune of about 30 lead service line replacements a year under current funding levels.
Okay.
So as things go, as the funds aren't available, you know, there is that private responsibility of the homeowners. Chad's going to say one more thing. He's going to give us $30 million, he just said.
Thank you, Chad. Yep. Okay, good night.
Yeah, mic drop. So I think, you know, Lou keeps talking about, you know, how much money we can give this the city. And the kind of the formulas that we're using to kind of allocate the funds across the state, because there's limited funding, is based on the identified and known lead service lines in the state. So as Luke was mentioning, like, if you don't know, or if you have an unknown service line and it's on the private side, and the city's reaching out, the utility's reaching out to you, please let them in your house identify that. That lets them know that this is now a lead service line, a known lead service line, and then when they apply for funding next year, that $1 million might be $2 or $3 or $4 million. You know, Duluth has gotten about $60 million total over the last few years. They got into the game really early, but we kind of based this funding similar to them. So this year they're getting $15 million based on the number of lead service lines that they have identified. And they did a great job identifying the lead service lines. So it's really important for everyone in this room to give the utility the opportunity to identify your service line. If Hibbing's been great. They've been pushing really hard to get this done, get everything identified and address the issues. So please work with them as much as you can.
Excellent. A couple, Senator Farnsworth, can we just get Senator Farnsworth?
Thanks, Luke. So I just had a few things I want to say, and I have to go pick my kid up for basketball at 8, so I'm going to say it quick and maybe take a couple of questions if that's okay. But this is something that we are definitely aware of. We know that, especially in the older communities, if you look down the Mississippi River, Wabasha, the oldest city in the state, Stillwater, a lot of the really historic cities have this problem, Duluth, St. Paul. So like somebody said, Hibbing is not unique in this situation. We are unique for two things, though. One, we have over 100 miles of water line, and a lot of those other cities don't have those problems, and so we are trying to get funding. And the Iron Range in general has another unique problem. Every Wednesday, blasting happens across the Iron Range, and that does affect water lines. We have some of the small cities like McKinley that it's pretty much destroyed their water system. So we know that this is a problem. The lead bill that passed in '23, that was actually one of the few bills that I voted for that year, because it was a good bill that's going to help people, and it's something that we need to continue funding. And for our region, I'll continue to fight for bonding funds. I think, what do we have, a $12 million request in this year, Luke, or this biennium? That doesn't mean we'll get the 12 million, it doesn't mean there will be a bonding bill. I'll support a bonding bill. But just for context, let's say there's $1 billion bonding bill, and Julie knows what I'm talking about because she's been through this. If there's $1 billion bonding bill, state government usually gets to decide where about half of it goes, to state buildings, to colleges, to universities, and then the legislature kind of gets the rest to divide up among the different caucuses. And so if you figure $400 to $500 million in a bonding bill divided by 67 Senate districts, that certainly isn't going to reach that $97 million in 1 year or 5 years. So it's going to take a while. We kind of have to chunk away at it to get that funding. In 2023, we got $67 million in bonding for Senate District 7, which was the most I think that had ever gone to any Senate district, but that was a weird year because there was a huge surplus, and now we're sort of back to normal, looking at deficits in the general fund. But it is something that we're aware of. So any couple of questions before I leave to go pick my son up? Nothing?
First off, thank you, Senator Farnsworth, for being here. I'm curious, just in your own personal opinion, what likelihood do you think it is that we'll get that bonding bill through?
50-50. It's an election year, so you just never know.
Thank you.
But for the record, I have voted for bonding bills. Do support bonding. Especially in our community, it's necessary. There's for instance some of the big suburbs down in the Twin Cities. Their legislators don't necessarily support bonding because they don't need it, because they have 5,000 houses in 3 square miles and they have a huge tax base. Communities like ours definitely need that.
I have a question for you, Senator, and that is is there anything specific on lead, or are you anticipating that lead funding would be wrapped up with the overall PFA funding bill at the end of session, which would likely be a Hail Mary based on, election year politics if I were a betting man?
I haven't heard anything specific about lead for this year. It could end up with the PFA funding. I'm not sure. I'm not on that committee, so I follow the education stuff a little bit more closely, although I know that this is a need for our community. But maybe the folks from the Department of Health kind of have been tracking those bills that are running through that committee.
Yeah, I can touch on it a little bit. It's kind of early to say too much, but no, appreciate that, Senator. Yeah, there's definitely going to be an ask. There's quite a few. There's a lot of interest, as you know, from both Greater Minnesota and the Metro to have another lead bill this year. The tricky thing with lead, and you probably know this, is because the work is done on the private side, it has to be general fund. So it's not like your typical bonding bill, so we have to have kind of a budget surplus for the most part to be able to fund lead service lines this way. That's not always the case. So it's a little trickier on the lead side. We can't always bond for it because we need to do the work on private property, and we can't use bond proceeds on private property. But hopefully we get something.
Yeah, and it depends on what we do with the budget. We'll see what the budget forecast next month is. So right now, the November forecast said about a $2.5 billion surplus for the next 2 years, but then the tails, the 2 years after that, $3 billion deficit. And that $3 billion deficit is assuming spending the $2.5 billion surplus. So there really isn't really a surplus. And so we're gonna have to work on that. The last thing I do want to say, because no politician likes to admit they don't know something, not knowing the specific bills, just so you know, there are about 4,000 bill introductions already for this biennium. So I always scan the bill introductions and look for any anti-mining bills that I have to try and kill, but I don't remember seeing anything about lead. So thanks for the invitation, and as always, if you have any specific questions, just feel free to email or call my office. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator.
for being here.
Nice to be here. Well, that pretty much wraps. Oh, was there another question? Okay, right here. Yeah.
One right there.
Last summer or sometime last year, you put a forecast on the metrics for your water line replacement in the next few years. How soon is these new lead issues going to revise that schedule?
Well, that's a great question. We haven't officially approved our capital budget for 2026 because we wanted to have this public hearing today. We'll be taking it up again at the commission meeting tomorrow to look at our plan work that we have. And at that point, we'll be earmarking, it's up for discussion, how much to earmark for a lead-specific project. Of course, we'd like to have all the funding first known before we can do that, in which case that's waiting a long time that I don't think is acceptable. So if I were to guess, the commission is going to approve or will discuss seriously a water project around the 8 blocks of known lead replacements that we have this year, in addition to a lead service line replacement. But that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. So so far we have been replacing 2 miles of water main a year, which is very aggressive compared to what Hibbing has done historically. But remember, we have 100 miles of water main to replace with the average age of before World War II. It's going to take us a long time. So when we think about it, if a water main lasts, the service life is expected to be around 50 years, we got to get going. So most of our system would be at that point of what's deemed catastrophic failure. And believe me, by looking at the call-outs and the invoices for water emergency break repairs, I'd say Hibbing is right now the water break capital of the state, if I dare say the world at this point, for the amount of water breaks we already have. So we do have a big need. We're tackling it head on. That's the $97 million that you saw on there. It's going to take a lot of money, but that's what we're doing, and we're trying to minimize the impact on ratepayers as much as we can.
Well,
So,
yes, by the time you trace everything, you'll be starting all over.
you know, that's the way it goes. But also too, this is the first time Hibbing has been 100 years old. Okay, so I think this is the first time after the city was built that we're facing this infrastructure, just based on the history of our country, our region, and certainly our city, of when and how it was developed. So the important thing is that we just don't shy away from the task that's needed, because the alternative is just shut the lights off, and we're not doing that. So we're going forward. One more question right here.
So where are these blocks that were identified? And is there a plan for them? And would it be like what you did to 23rd Street? Are you going to take trees out and everything? And
I wish I had a nice answer that we can do a water main project without replacing trees. The trees that we take down will be replaced, so that's what I will say. The challenging thing that we'll see about trees on boulevards and our friends on Minnesota Street, that I still call them friends. I think there's still a couple of homes that don't like the trees that we had to necessarily take down.
And very close to that area.
Yeah, sure, yes, and I'm well aware, I love trees myself, I love big old trees. Unfortunately, the way that a lot of those trees have grown has been right up in the service lines. And so, you know, usually a lot of them have to get taken down and replanted with something else, so.
So do we know the blocks that are
Yes,
identified?
thank you. We do, I don't have it on the top of my head right now, but the engineers from Bolton and Mink do, and you can see that. Luke, is there anything you want to? Okay, good. Check with Luke. And we'll also publish that on our website, so you can see the status of that. I think that'd be great. I'm sure others will want to know that as well.
And
okay. Yeah, so Chad wanted me to mention something about just how we replace the service lines, and it's going to be kind of case-by-case basis, but most often directional drilling can be used sometimes, so we don't have to dig up the whole yard to replace the service line.
Good.
So,
thank you.
Yeah,
for saying that.
yeah, I think that's
that.
really good. Yeah, because that oftentimes the water mains are the service lines right in your front yard,
Yeah.
and you know, no one wants to miss out on a summer enjoyment of your yard.
So will that be happening soon?
Yes, so we'll make our plans known in the next couple of weeks for our water main replacement projects for next year. Meanwhile, we're going to continue to try to get as much funding and accelerate it. So what I would guess is that we're going to start with a pretty small, relatively small project right now based on what we know, and be prepared to improve that. But again, this is all subject to our discussion at the commission meeting on how we do that. But the blocks that we have identified, we already have some good sample projects on there, and that's what we're going to be taking up right now.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Just a quick question, so those blocks are going to be outlined on HPU's website?
Yes, we'll put them up on the website. And yes, and then also Luke Hakelock can show you the map, and Paul knows intimately where those are as well. So, anything else I missed? There's still, one more question.
They came into my mom's house to look at her, you know, the pipe coming into her house. And whoever came in there just walked out and left. They never said another word to her. She thought somebody was still in the house. She doesn't know what kind of pipe she has in her house.
Okay.
I went and looked at it. To me, it looks like it's either galvanized or lead. How can I find that out? That's one of my questions. Then I got a couple more.
Okay, so first answer is we're going to look on the computer out in the hall afterwards to look up your mother's address, and then we'll be able to tell right then.
Okay, and then I had my house tested, and I had my mom's house tested independently out of the place in Virginia. Do you want those results?
I think it's helpful, I'm curious in general about people's testing results, but from the official perspective, we have to go through the process that the Department of Health monitors. But I am very curious on lead testing results, just in general.
Okay, do you want those results?
Yeah, you can send them in to the public utility.
Okay, and I'll get an email from you then out there, so I can just forward you the emails?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and so my mom's came up at 4, mine was at about 1.5. It sounds to me that any lead is not good.
That's correct.
So it sounds to me, with the way this town is sitting right now and the speed that things are going to move, everybody should have a filter in their house.
I'll repeat the mandate from the EPA. There is no safe level of lead. Hibbing is at a high-risk community for lead due to a number of factors, and so I would take seriously just your own health and safety, and particularly if you do have a known lead line, to take the steps for the filtration and things that you have.
Right, so when it says in your documentation, if it's at 15, that's when you should take action. You should actually take action at any level.
The 15 parts per million is I'm going to hand it over to Hannah right now because I get confused with all the numbers.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I can kind of explain where that 15 comes from. So the 15 parts per billion is a system-wide level. So if there's a certain amount of homes above that level, the system has to take action. And that was set when the EPA first came out with the lead and copper rule, which was back in the 90s. And it's based on health, yes, but also at the time, the best available technology to treat lead in drinking water. It's not as good as what we have now. So they set it at the most reasonable level that they thought that most systems in the country could meet, based on funding, based on technology, and that's system-wide. But on an individual case-by-case basis, that's a different risk factor there. So.
Thank you. So that the action level, so the
That's your action level.
that's our action level is 15.
I got a question. At what point is that lowering to 10 parts per billion? Is it in 2027?
So there was a question, if you didn't hear that, when is that action level threshold going to go down from 15? And this is where I'll just give a little personal opinion that I think we should be focusing on getting the lead out. That no matter what the parts per million is, that could change over the time. We just want to get the lead out. And so for right now, the action level is 15. That may change in the future. I don't know, but I still don't want lead in the city of Hibbing's drinking water system.
Yeah, absolutely. But to answer the question, the federal action level is lowering to 10 in November 2027.
Yeah, so the rule, the bar keeps getting raised higher. If you're looking at this as just a compliance thing, but this is much more than just compliance. This is our water, this is our future. That's why we need to get the lead out. So.
Wouldn't it be easier just to move the town again?
No comment. I'm Julie Sandstone, I'm one of the commissioners for the PUC. I want to say thank you all for coming out tonight. Really, it was the commission's priority to try to get ahead of this issue and get out to the public to share the information as transparently as we can. We don't pretend for a minute to have every answer. We don't pretend that every answer we're going to give you is going to be the perfect answer, but we are sharing with you what we know. I can say in full transparency, the utility is doing everything we can on our side with the funds that we have available to act as quickly and efficiently as we can. The more money we have that comes in, the more we will be able to do. With the limited funds that we have, we are prioritizing with the lines that have been identified. That's where we're starting. We know the problem is far greater, but this is our first action step. We are also trying, our real intent here is to share with the public things that you can be doing to mitigate effects as much as possible. Run your water. That's a simple thing. Turn your water on, let it run. If you can get a filtration system, that's not going to hurt. That'll be a helpful tool. We didn't talk a great deal about it, but I think you're going to be hearing more about the treatment that's being added to the system. That's going to help mitigate not only the lead, the galvanized, but it's kind of like a coating throughout. So for, I think your question said, okay, we know the water main, we know the main line coming in, but what about any kind of faucets you have in your house, those types of things? This water treatment additive is going to be helping on that. So there are things that, you know, are in place that are immediate, that we're doing, that you can do to help mitigate those effects until the bigger things like how are we going to dig in the ground is going to take place. So together, we're going to work on this. Together, we're going to do this. And every one of the commissioners is available for questions. Reach out if you have questions. Again, we want to get out. Whoops. Sorry. We want to get out in front of this. We really do want to get out in front of this. Education is key. And so keep the questions coming. Please understand this is very aged infrastructure. And it's gonna take time and it's gonna take money. But there are really practical things we can be doing in the here and now. And that's what we wanna help you guys do. So, thank you all for your questions, and we're gonna keep these town halls coming, and we'll give as much information as we can. And I really appreciate Senator Farnsworth being here. I know he already had to leave. This is not a partisan issue. This is everybody's water. So, you know, as you reach out to your legislator, your senators, they want to hear from you. This impacts everybody. This isn't a partisan issue. This is a all of us issue. So.
We did take a sample bottle at HPU and bring it back to.
His question is, can they bring up get a sample bottle from HPU and bring it back?
So at this point, if your house is not lead, we don't have those random samples available at this point. We do look forward to looking at that for the springtime perhaps, but at this point we don't have random samples available. We want to get the lead lines identified first, and then make sure we're targeting the available resources right there.
Thank you to all our resources here tonight. We really appreciate you coming out and being part of this conversation with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandsted. Well said, yes. Chad, Hannah, Ashton, and David, yes. Thank you guys so much for coming out here. Let's give them another round of applause. While I'm going to conclude this portion of the program, we will definitely stick around to answer your questions, both with the commission here and the staff from the Department of Health and St. Louis County for any additional questions you have. But thank you for taking your time tonight. This is the beginning, as Commissioner Sampson said. This is just our first step. So pay attention for more, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Elliot, take us away. Okay, all right. Thank you guys.